If you want to have great conversations with others, then stop thinking you need to be more interesting and instead put your effort into becoming more interested in the people that you talk to. And there's one surprising, simple skill that you can practice that will help you communicate to people your interest in them. And not only that, it will help you figure out which of these people would be great people to invite into your inner circle to make best friends or romantic partners, and which relationships you ought to probably limit. Hi everybody, I'm Greg from Heart Tools, where we make it simple to build great relationships. And I have a friend named Scotty who is a Miami Dolphins fan. And I asked him one time, how did you become a Miami Dolphin fan? Because he grew up and lived in Southern Ohio. He's a fan of all the local teams. And so it was a little odd to me that he was a Miami Dolphin fan. And he said when he was a kid, his dad took him to the NFL Hall of Fame. And while they were walking down a hallway, his dad tapped him on the shoulder and said, "You ought to go get that man's autograph." And so Scotty walked up to this man who he said was just massive and asked him for an autograph. And the man looked at Scotty and said, "I'll make you a deal. I will give you my autograph if you promise to be a Miami Dolphin fan for the rest of your life." And Scotty said yes. And so the man said, "Let's shake on it." And he said his whole forearm just disappeared in this man's massive hand. And then after they shook, Larry Zonka gave Scotty his autograph. And here Scotty is decades later, faithfully keeping his promise that he made to a legendary Miami Dolphin. Now here's why I tell this story. When you hear that Scotty's a Miami Dolphin fan, you probably don't feel a very big connection with him unless you're a Miami Dolphin fan, and then you might feel a little bit of a connection with him. But when you hear the story of him meeting Larry Zonka and making this deal and then keeping his promise for decades, it's hard not to feel a human connection to Scotty, even if you don't like the Dolphins and even if you don't watch football. And here's the point. The point is that categories and labels are not connecting, but concrete stories and details of human moments are very connecting. One of the big reasons our conversations are not very connecting is we get in the habit of listening to people to figure out what categories they belong to. What label do I put on this person? And we have this idea that if we know what category they belong to, what religious category they belong to, or political category, or financial category, whatever the categories that are important to you, we tend to think if we know what categories and labels to put on them, then we know the most important things about them. Now, stop and think for just a moment about one of your all-time favorite characters from a movie or a TV series or a novel. And think about the fact that when we are presented with a character and all we know about the character is what category they belong to, what label applies to them, those characters tend to be one-dimensional, uninteresting cliches, right? They're not good characters to be the main character of the story. They can be okay, useful characters as a minor character, as a supporting character, but those are not the characters that we're most interested in. On the other hand, when we find characters that we're connected to, characters that we're moved by or are emotionally invested in, then we're usually given concrete, specific moments from experiences in their life that present a very unique individual. Now, they still belong to different categories, but that's not what is emphasized. Those tend to go into the background, and the important thing are the individual things that they've experienced that make them a unique individual. I think about the four kids in the series Stranger Things, and they're nerds, and so they belong in that category, but we're given so much more than just that they belong in that category. We're given a lot of unique moments. We see them in this, at the end of this 12-hour Dungeons and Dragon campaign, emotionally invested as though their life depended on the outcome of the game, right? Or we see a moment where someone says, hey, does anybody have a compass? And 7 compasses are thrown on the bed, right? At these specific moments that paint a picture of unique individuals, and that even if you're not a nerd, you really feel a sense of connection to these characters. And here's the point. When we listen to others in order to figure out what category they belong into or what labels to put on them, accurate or not, right? When we listen to people with that goal, we tend to turn them into cliches. When instead we listen for concrete experiences, moments from their life that matter to them, then we open up the possibility of discovering a unique person. And here's a way to conceptualize this that could be very helpful to you when you're having conversations, and that is, make sure that you're not listening to the other person as though they are a minor or supporting character in your story. Instead, listen to them realizing that they are the main character in their own story. So don't just listen for big categories. That'll be part of the conversation necessarily, but make sure you move into individual human moments that they've had or would like to have in the future. Don't just talk about theoretical concepts. That's fun and that's good, but it'll be more connecting if you move into concrete, specific examples from their life. And practically what that means is when you're listening to an experience from someone's life, what you want to try to do is paint a picture in your mind of what they're talking about, or create a movie scene in your mind of what they're talking about that involves 3 things. The first thing you can focus in on are the 5 senses, right? As they're talking, what are the sights, the sounds, the touches, the tastes, the smells? It won't have all 5, but there'll be maybe 1 or 2 that'll be very important for that story, and you want to try to capture those in the movie scene that you're thinking about as they describe their experience. The second thing you want to focus in on is their emotions. What did they feel when this happened? And then the third thing you want to focus in on is the impact that this experience had on them. What were the choices or the changes in their life because of this experience? And sometimes the impact will be a big impact, and that's good to know. Sometimes the impact will just be a small thing, like, how did that impact you? Oh my goodness, I laughed so hard I couldn't stop, right? But try to paint a picture or create a scene in your mind that includes the 5 senses, that includes their emotional experience, and the impact that this experience had on them. So here's what you can practice with this video. In the last video, I talked about creating a list of questions beforehand that would be fun for you to talk about and fun for you to hear about with the people that you have conversations with. Go back and look at those questions now and make sure that they give someone an opportunity to talk about a specific moment that they've had or a specific moment that they would like to have in the future, and then create your own answers to those questions in terms of these 3 categories. So talk about the question in terms of the senses. So if it's a Christmas memory, you may talk about how the Christmas tree looked or what the cinnamon rolls smelled like, those sorts of things. Talk about the emotions that you experienced in that memory and talk about how it impacted you. And that will help you understand, the more you do that with your answers, it'll give you a picture of what you're looking for when you're listening to other people. Now, one thing you may discover as you do that is that people are not used to other people being interested in them, and they're used to answering just in categories and labels and leaving it there, and they may not go on to describe that specific experience they had, right? And so it may be helpful for you to ask questions around those 3 things, right? Oh, I've never been to the Grand Canyon. What did that look like in the morning, right? Or what did you feel when you saw it? What was the impact on you? Now, we want to make sure when we're listening, and we've talked about this in other videos, we don't want to ask probing personal questions. We don't want to ask questions that give the other person the idea, I'm trying to judge and evaluate them. You know, like, well, why would you go to the Grand Canyon? Why spend all, that's a probing question. We don't want to ask questions that take the conversation to a more intimate level, because the speaker is the one who sets the level of intimacy, not the listener. And so we don't want to push to a more personal level. Now, if you listen well, people will go to a more personal level often, but you don't want to push it there. So you don't want to ask probing questions, but you do want to ask questions that will help you create a concrete picture in your mind that includes the senses and the emotions and the impact that this experience had on the other person. And that will communicate to them, and they may not even be aware of it on a conscious level, but they will have a sense, wow, this person is really interested in me. Now, as we say over and over again here at Heart Tools, reciprocity is a huge part of building relationships. And so you cannot control whether someone else is interested in getting to know you as an individual. You can control how interested you are in other people. And then as you show and demonstrate interest in other people, what you can do is pay attention to who also shows interest in you. And this is a great tool for figuring out who to go deeper into a relationship with, who to invest more time and energy with as a friend or as a confidant or as a romantic partner, and who not to. Because if someone really isn't interested in going past the labels or the categories, if that's where their conversation with you stops as you're talking about yourself, then what that tells you is they see you as a supporting role or a minor character in their story. They don't have the capacity to see you as the main person in your own story. And that's something in healthy relationships. What you want is two separate individuals who are both powerful and valuable in their own right. So go back to your list of questions. Make sure they're questions that allow the possibility, both you and the person you're talking to talk about concrete, specific moments and experiences from life, or concrete, specific hopes and dreams for the future. And practice giving your answer in terms of the five senses, what the picture looks and feels and smells and sounds like, the emotions that go along with it, and the impact, big or little, that experience had on you. And that will help you begin looking for those things as you listen to others, and help you build great connections with very unique, interesting people. Simple steps. Practice, practice, practice. That's what Heart Tools is all about.